Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Harvey. I'm an alcoholic, and I'm grateful to be here. Thank you, Phil, for inviting me to do this. Let's see if I can get this adjusted right, whatever. Um, it's always an honor and a privilege when I'm asked to share in Alcoholics Anonymous, and whether it be in a church basement or in a Zoom room such as this, it's to me, these are sacred places. When I walk into a meeting or I sign into a meeting, it's a sacred place, just like to a person in a religion, going into their place of worship is a sacred place. And the reason I see it that way is because that's where I began to have a relationship with my higher power. And I've seen miracles in these rooms. I've seen miracles, and I've had them in my life, and I've seen them so many times, and it's just such a beautiful thing. So it's always an honor and a privilege to be asked to do anything. And I'm glad I can be here. This is a treat, and I've heard speakers on this meeting, and I religiously get the daily ponderables, and I was telling Phil, I got my phone set to read it to me while I'm in the shower. Even if I've already read it, or if I'm going to read it again, because there's something I really want to absorb, because it's hard to absorb everything. There's a lot in that 10 minutes. And there's also some non-AA approved literature in there, because it comes from different literature, but it's all spiritual literature and it's all recovery based. And I think that's wonderful, because we don't have the only good stuff. But in an AA meeting like such as this is supposed to be about alcoholism, and that's what my story is about. My story does involve the use of other drugs. So did Bill Wilson, so did Dr. Bob, so did Alcoholics Anonymous. I mean, the list goes on, but and when we get to that, you'll understand why alcohol is. I'm an alcoholic for sure. So I've got to give you a little background information. My date of my last drink, which is also the date of my last drug, was March 18th, 1988. And for all the time in between, I am truly grateful. I've been living on borrowed time for a very long time. Or if you don't like that phrase, I've been living in a second life. It's a whole different life if I was reborn into when I put it down and started to get well. That's a long time. I have a home group. My home group is the Saratoga. It's the St. Armand's Noon Group in Sarasota, Florida. It meets Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday at noon. I make it my business to be there on Tuesday and Friday. Tuesday is a step meeting, and Friday is an open meeting. So I go to those meetings, and I've been going to a lot on Zoom. So it's hard to get the transition back. I had a lot of contempt prior to investigation about online meetings. I thought there was some poor second or paled by comparison. If you got nothing else, they're kind of lame anyhow. All kinds of stuff, 30 plus years sobriety, and I'm making judgments based on ignorance. And I have opinions on things that I'm not qualified to render. And in fact, I had sponsored a guy who did a lot of traveling for his work, and I'd say, do you ever go to a meeting when you're in these cities? No. And so I'm going to try online meetings. Well, it's better than nothing, I guess, if that's all you're willing to do. But then I have another fellow who can't see and he can't drive, and he was in the middle of nowhere, and he found some pretty good online meetings. So I sent the one guy to the second guy, but it never resulted in him going to meetings when he was out of town, online or otherwise. But I still had these notions about it. Two and a half years ago, I started going to online meetings a lot. In fact, I go to a meeting every Monday night. I'm an attorney. I got sober, then I got a law degree, then I practiced law, then I retired. It's a nice life, all in sobriety. And I go to International Lawyers and Alcoholics Anonymous on Mondays, which is online at 8 p.m. And it's people from all over it, US, Canada, some Europe, Africa. We have regulars from the Philippines, great sobriety. And there's nothing better than this format for people from all over to share. When you look at all the different people that are here and all the different places, some of them have where they're from. I mean, I get it. We shouldn't all be on Zoom if we're all in the same town. We should all get together. And I really, truly believe that. But when you're not geographically situated in the same place, I am amazed at how tremendous this platform is. And so I do that on Monday nights, and I host the meeting after the meeting. So like this meeting, it doesn't just close up at 9. People stay around and have fellowship and get to know each other and share problems and ask questions. And I also been going to a WARFRAT meeting. I'll get into WARFRATs a little later on. And that meets on Saturday at noon and Wednesday at 8:30. And that's also people all over the US, all over Canada and beyond. And we couldn't meet but for this platform. One of our members killed himself a year and a half ago. One of the regular members at our meeting. About this right around that time, a good friend of mine that I met in a beach in Mexico, but I saw regularly on these Zoom meetings as well as talked to on the phone, her brother didn't make it from this thing, you know. Booze and drugs killing a lot of people. And they did much more so, I think, during the pandemic. Because we tell people not to, new guys show up at the meeting, new girls show up at the meeting. The first thing we do is we get around them, we give them our numbers, we do our best to keep them from isolating. But, you know, in early 2020, new people would show up and we got isolated, right? And that's a very hard thing. And people would say, all these people are going out drinking, all these people are overdosing. And what do we do? And I said, you know, maybe, I know I'm supposed to chase my sobriety, so I got to chase my sponsor a little bit in terms of the communication. Although at this point we're past that. But stop waiting for the new guy to chase you. If he's got to isolate because he can't come to your house, he can't meet you at a meeting, call him back, call the new guy. There's nothing wrong with an old timer calling a new person. There's something wrong with an old timer doing all the work for that new person's sobriety. I've had amazing opportunity. Since I guess I'm on the Zoom platform, let me just tell you a little bit more about that, and then I'll get started at the beginning of my story. There's a fellow that I haven't met, and I'm close with him, and his sponsor, he's from the southeast seaboard of the United States. I moved from Buffalo to Florida. His sponsor's from Calgary, Alberta. And his sponsor said he suggested that he do a 5th step with me, which of course involved me showing him how I did a 4th step right out of the big book. And we had a tremendous meeting. And we got so much closer, and it wasn't very different than having the guy in my living room. It really wasn't. You know, I was over that stuff. I'm over this, like, online meetings are kind of BS, which is what I used to think, because they're not. We've seen people coming in on their first meetings and people rallying around, and now they can go to real meetings or live meetings, I should say. But not all the meetings that became virtual over the pandemic are going to be there. They're not supposed to be there because they were in place of meetings in a specific geography. But some of them, like this one, I think will stick around, and I sure hope it does. I don't even have a clock here. Bill, you keep me posted on the time, right? My sponsor, my home group used to meet, well, still meet, my old home group met on Sundays from 8 to 9 and as a speaker meeting. And my sponsor told me that they told him early on that nobody ever got sober at the North Buffalo group after 9 p.m. So, you know, don't go over, right? Because the old guys really didn't like it when you went over. You know, and truthfully, there's no reason to go over. But I'm really grateful to be here. I was born downstate. When I say that, Buffalo, I was born in the New York area. My parents are from the New York area, and I grew up in Long Island for grade school. And I once heard a speaker in Toronto say that alcoholics are miswired in the factory, and that was like, boom, it was one of those moments where like a light bulb went off. Because I felt like I was unloved and unwanted. But that was objectively, my parents loved me, and they told me they loved me every single day. They hugged me, they kissed me, they did things with me. They spent, you know, they did everything that a parent who loves and wants their child, everything that those type of parents would do, they did. But the information that came in somehow got twisted, and I felt unloved and unwanted by the time I was in past 4th grade. And it wasn't anything they did. I think just so, like that speaker said, I was miswired. The wires were crossed because the information coming in did not result in what my feeling of what the reality was. I did have some problems behavioral problems. And after fourth grade, I went away to boarding school. Um, I got in a lot of trouble. I was not successful. It wasn't because I wasn't intelligent. I could look back, I probably had ADD and wasn't diagnosed. My parents tried everything, man. They ran me around to every doctor in New York, every old tried and true or newfangled idea about kids like me. They really spared nothing in terms of their time, nothing in terms of their expense. Um, and I know that they went to great emotional and financial sacrifice to do that. And when I went away to school, that was very, very hard on them emotionally, and it was very hard on them financially. And they didn't, I doubt they thought twice about it, because I was loved and I was wanted and they wanted me to get well. I just didn't get that. And so I was in fifth grade. I'm in the school, and my cousin Betsy died, and she lived a block and a half from me, and I was close with Betsy. And Betsy died of a brain tumor on Thanksgiving. Can you hear me all right, Phil? You're making faces. Is that at me? Okay. And she died of this awful brain tumor that she had been fighting for a number of years. And I don't know what my ideas were about God before then, but I did not have as successful a life as other children who don't get in trouble all the time and get along and don't get into fights and don't eat paste in kindergarten and kick the teacher. I didn't have the type of pleasant life that some of the other kids had. I don't really know what I thought about this higher power or God then, but I'll tell you, when my cousin Betsy died on Thanksgiving, that was like, if there's a God, I got no use for this God. I don't think there probably is, because how could that wonderful thing do to this little girl, and fast forward until I'm 24 years old, and I'm in a rehab, and my counselor asked me, what type of emotions I have, what feelings do I have, and she brought out one of those charts some of you may have seen with the smiley faces of every emotion, and I could circle 3 of them, and that was about it: anger, anxiety, and excitement, or some kind of a positive anxiety thing, like elation. And I had shut down my sadness and my fear. And I was homesick. I cried when I got into that school. They beat the crap out of me. I stopped crying and I toughened up. And by the time I was 24, I had such a small emotional life, because I just shut everything down, and everything that made me feel bad, I just didn't have. And you can't get rid of the anger, the anxiety, and sometimes the thrill. Everything else was gone. I went to a lot of different schools, and I'm using the word school very, very loosely. Some of them were treatment centers, some of them were hospitals. When I was done with high school, I believe that I successfully completed 3 of the 9 places with credentials to move on. And I had been going to school in Texas for about 3.5 years, and then I came home. Now, let me tell you what's an alcoholic moment. I went to driver's ed in Austin, Texas. I took the GED in Austin, Texas. My parents came to take me from the school, and they left some time because I had an appointment for my road test for to get a driver's license. And if I got my driver's license at 17, before I got on the plane to go back to New York, I didn't have a license to drive, period. New York would have honored it. So I convinced my parents, well, I got to go say goodbye to these people. And since they already left, you got to just stop by their apartment for 5 minutes. And, after 5 minutes, they're honking the horn. After 10 minutes, they're looking for me. After 15 minutes, maybe I'm back in the car, and I smell like I smell like alcohol. And there's a smell of marijuana on my clothes. I'm like, okay, let's go to, the public safety. Let's go to public safety. And my dad looked at me, are you crazy? You couldn't hold off for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. We are not bringing you to take your road test when you smell like alcohol and marijuana. And that's, of course, the right thing to do. And I was angry. And then they paid to send me to driver's ed when I got back. I had to do it all over again. It was another 6 months because I couldn't wait. I couldn't put it off just once or just that 5 minutes. I didn't always drink and get high. There were very few times that I could have. The first time for me was in 3rd grade. My friend stole a joint from his brother. And we went between these 2 buildings after school and smoked it, and we passed it back and forth 3 times. We're little guys, it doesn't take a lot for a little guy to get buzzed, right? And so my guess is he was a social 3rd grade pot smoker and I wasn't. And the reason I say that is because after 3 hits, we got a little buzz going, he put it out. Now I just wanted more and more and more. I took it back. I smoked it till it burned my fingers with a couple of lame, you sure don't want some, and looked and asked him for more. So I was right from the gates. I was, using alcoholically. He just wanted to get, I think I don't know what social drinkers do. I think what they do is they have a little bit to drink. Maybe they get a little bit of release from care and worry, like the big book says, they get a little bit of a buzz going. And then they just try to maintain that buzz, not overshoot the mark. The social drinking buzz is something I'm looking back over my shoulder as I rocket past it. I never wanted to stop there. And that was from the beginning. And after he got beat up by his brother for stealing his pot, we started stealing booze from our parents. And whether it was sniffing glue or being the best guy in biology class, he had to seal your slides with clear nail polish. And they thought I was the greatest student. I was just sniffing the nail polish. There's very little that I could have done that I didn't. But what I found early on is that alcohol did it even more consistently than marijuana. But I thought I was a pothead or a pillhead or a cokehead or an acid head or a speed head. These are things how I characterize myself. And my first day in rehab, my counselor said, well, you say you're a drug addict, but you're not an alcoholic. And so when you were smoking pot, were you drinking? Well, yeah. When you were eating downers, were you drinking? Well, yeah. When you eat uppers, yeah. Speed, yeah. Cocaine, yeah. No matter what I thought my drug of choice was, which is really a bad term, but you know what I'm talking about. No matter what I thought, there was always booze. There was never booze in front of me to drink that I didn't drink. Sometimes it's easier for little kids to get things that aren't non-alcohol, non-alcohol mind-altering substances. But there was not booze in front of me that got wasted. When I stopped drinking, it was because I ran out or passed out. That was it. I didn't just say it was time to stop. And that's just my experience from the beginning, from day one. And I just drank to get as wasted as I could. So I came back to New York and I was starting to take some art classes, and I was really inspired by art, and it's a lot of great galleries and museums with so much going on, but there's a lot of partying. This is late 70s, early 80s, and New York is all sex, drugs, rock and roll, and everyone's drinking too. And if you want to be in a party, it was the best time to be in a party in New York. And until it wasn't for me, and it was until the very end, but then it wasn't. As much as I loved my art education, it interfered with my drinking and getting high. And so my classes fell by the wayside, and I had to drop out of that. Everything I cared about, I ended up abandoning. Alcohol didn't take these things from me. I gave them away, and let me just fast forward to the last year or so. Or let me fast forward to my trip to Buffalo, and then I'll get to the last year. When in January of 1983, and I just 6 months ago found out it wasn't 84, but it's another story. I got on a plane with 2 friends from New York and this girl from Buffalo who knew my friend Danny from Buffalo. And Danny was really out of control. And it was my job to watch Danny and to dole out booze and drugs to him so he didn't overshoot the mark. So you get on this plane to go to Buffalo because somebody said that a particular substance, they didn't have any. And I knew some guy on the Upper West Side that would whip some up and I could bring some. So I went to Buffalo, and on the plane to Buffalo, we sat on the runway for 2 hours before we took off. It was from Newark. And man, everything that I had in me was wearing down or wearing off. And oh man, I couldn't wait till the plane took off and the drink cart started rolling down towards me. It almost had like a neon glow. And just about as it got to me, there was turbulence and they discontinued the drink service. And man, I was so pumped. And so in the bathroom, disabled the smoke detector, rolled the fatty, smoked it. And I didn't shut the bathroom door when I left, and the plane reeked all the way up to first class. You know, they didn't take things as seriously back then. They told me I couldn't fly that airline anymore, and they canceled my return ticket. So in Buffalo, I hook up with this girl who Danny liked that night. And I came to in the morning and I had urinated and defecated and vomited on the bed. Not really a sexy picture, right? She apparently is crazy about me. I wake up, my friends are gone. My friends are gone. My friend Danny, it was my job to watch Danny. My job, my babysitting job, I failed miserably. By the time I came to, they had already gone to New York, cleaned out Danny's bank accounts, and were halfway to California. Danny died a few weeks later, booze and drugs. And, you know, I have goosebumps when I think about it because it was my job to watch Danny, you know. And a little bit later on, I'll tell you about how Danny's sister came back into my life, which is just stuff you can't make up. So now I'm in Buffalo. Her mother's kind of gives her money, gives me a check to leave. But I'm like, I'm homeless in New York. I might as well just stay if they're writing checks. And I just abused and used these people. To anybody, I was a liar, a cheat, and a thief. And if you knew me, that's what I was up to. And the closer you were with me, the more you cared about me, the more I would try to exploit that and take advantage of that until you had enough. When I got sober, I had been disowned by my parents for a couple of years, and really they were late to that. They should have done it sooner. So let me fast forward to January 1987. It's New Year's Eve, and I'm thinking on the 31st, my daughter will be a year old. And at the end of January, and you know, it's a Sunday, I'm going to take her to the aquarium, and I'm not going to just waste the day like I always do, sleeping off the night before. And I really meant it. And I thought about that every morning and every night and through the course of the day, and maybe give or take 100 times between New Year's Eve and January 30th. Now, I didn't know anything about being powerless over drugs or powerless over alcohol. I had no clue about that. And so I'm not one of these guys where it came to gradually. In less than 24 hours, I became acutely aware that I was powerless over alcohol. I was powerless over it when I drank it. I had no off switch, no brakes. I was powerless over it when I didn't drink it because all I did was think about it. And that's the type of powerlessness and unmanageability I'm told that the founders meant when they wrote that step. When it's in my body, I got no control. And when it's not in my body, I got no control because I'm obsessed about it till it gets in my body. So with it or without alcohol, I'm powerless over alcohol. And I wasn't going to drink, and then I did, and I wasn't going to do this, and I did. And the horrible end to this story is on her first birthday, I come to about 6:30 at night. It's dark out. She's in a playpen in a diaper that should have been changed. I mean, it's a very heavy diaper, and she's watching snow on the TV because I didn't pay the cable bill. And from that, the 30th to the 31st, I just knew my goose was cooked, and I didn't have the guts to kill myself in any more efficient or less dramatic way. So I set out to drink and drug myself to death, put as much poison in me as I could until I die. And almost a year later, I had accomplished that. About a year later, I was sick. I mean, I had one foot in the grave. I was overdue for dying. My skin was yellow. My eyes were red, popping out of my head. I was down 45 pounds. You know, my clothes were falling off of me. It was no longer romantic. I'm drinking generic vodka or generic gin straight out of the freezer. I'm seldom eating. And I'm there's a lot of other stuff involved. Just taking pills by the handful. Doesn't matter what they were. And smoking, and I'm very close to the end. And what was surprising about this particular day is I I knew I was at the end and I cared and I didn't want to die. Now that thought may have not come from a higher power that maybe you don't want to die and you should do something else. Because that certainly sounds like a self-interested thought. But then I had this other thought that came into my head that I know came from outside of me. And it's that there is a solution and you ought to go find it. What? I know I didn't have that information for that last year as I'm 1 foot in the grave. And I did. And that was, at the end of January, beginning of February, and March 18th was the last time I drank or got high. Just 3 days before I went to my first and only rehab. I mean, that idea that there's a solution and you ought to go find it, that came from another place, another source, not from me. And I believe that was the grace of God. That was, or the grace of a power, If grace is an unearned gift, I certainly had plenty of those. Grace is the truth that you see for an instant, and as soon as you want to put that truth away and ignore it and go back to the life of lies that you lead, you can't entirely, because it's always nagging at you because you just saw the truth. And no matter what you think, you can't turn it off, and it's always causing you to have that doubt. So I came into AA as desperate as the dying can be, like it says in the end of step 1 in the 12 and 12 is open-minded and as willing to listen as the dying can be. Open-minded to conviction, as willing to listen as the dying can be. I stood ready to do anything to remove the merciless obsession from me. And that gift of desperation has held me in very good stead. Initially, the hope, I sort of, my life was like living in a bleak abyss. And one thing I got shortly when I started showing up in AA was hope. I didn't know what that felt like. I didn't even know what that was. And it felt good. I didn't remember ever feeling that good. And I was just thrilled by it. And I got the first one at the meeting, the last one out, especially when I was living in my van, which I moved into 10 days out of rehab. I got very involved with AA in the fellowship, a little slower on the program, which is in the steps. But I really immersed myself in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm still here. That's the only reason I'm here. But what I found was that hope was a wonderful thing, and this whole thing about finding my relationship with this power. I wasn't really that concerned about it. Yeah, like step 2 is easy, right? Because I don't even have to believe that there's a power that will restore me to sanity. I just have to be open-minded, keep my eyes open to see if something presents itself, and be willing to, in those circumstances, concede that there's a power greater than me that could restore me to sanity. That there is, or there may be a power. How hard is that one to go along with? And I didn't really give that a lot of thought for a while. And I did this work through the steps, and I was making a lot of progress. And after a long time of being apart, at least more than half was my fault and my younger brother. We hadn't talked in years, and it was over some transactions between Philadelphia, where he lived, in Buffalo, that didn't go as planned, and it was awful. And but that Thanksgiving, we talked for hours and hours, and I talked to him about my recovery and sobriety and this new life, and he had no power, and he had no heat, and he's telling me, well, everything's gonna be fine a little bit later. And I'm just sitting there thinking, they're not turning his heat or his electric on at 11 o'clock on Thanksgiving night. But he's thinking just like I used to think, because either the booze or something else is going to be in his hand at that time, and everything's going to be fine. He said that he read the AA book and he read the NA book, and it wasn't for him. They told, I've heard it said that never met anybody too dumb to get sober, but they bury smart people all the time. And my brother was very smart. He was in Pennsylvania, pre-med to his pre-med at University of Pennsylvania. That's pretty good. And like I did with my art education, the lifestyle got really in the way and something had to give. And it was the only thing that ever gave was anything that other than the lifestyle, right? But we talked about everything because we crashed on for years. And I think I really feel in my heart of hearts that I made amends to him and he made amends to me. Like we were square for the first time in years. And it was such an amazing thing. And I did reach out to him and I did try to encourage him in the short time between Thanksgiving that year and the following January 10th when he died. And he died on my grandmother's birthday. Last person to hear from him, called her at 1 a.m. to wish her happy birthday, which was okay with my grandmother, by the way, but he didn't make it through the night. And it could happen to any of us. People think I'm being dramatic or somebody says, we step over bodies to do this thing or to get sober or stay sober. It's not dramatic, it's true. It's true. And I was talking to somebody yesterday, we have to get the, I can imagine if you're an oncologist and you're losing patients, that they take a great deal of satisfaction in the ones that they save and the ones that don't die. And that has to be enough to make up for all the ones that don't make it, right? Otherwise, why would anybody do that job? It'd be too depressing one day after day. And I think whether you're in Alcoholics Anonymous working with alcoholics or you're in a profession working with alcoholics in another capacity, the statistics as things are now are very poor. And right out of rehab, my roommate died 6 weeks after I got out of rehab. It's just it's incredible what happens. And what I have found is that if I just shut up and do what I'm told, life is better. I used to try to control everything. I used to think I was in control of things. The longer I'm sober, the more I realize that God's in control of more. And I use God not in maybe not in the way that you're used to hearing God. I use God because he's a very short word to describe all these different acronyms and all these different phrases that are power greater than myself. So I'm just using it as shorthand. If you're anti-religious, don't be alarmed. There's room for you in Alcoholics Anonymous, and you can do the steps even if you're anti-religious. I was a little anti-religious. When my brother died, I was really in a crossroads, and I had to. At that point, the hope wasn't enough. I thought I had thrown in the towel. I thought I had surrendered and abandoned myself to this program. And I was, what they used to say, we're in it 3 feet first. That's what they used to say when I got sober. And I thought I was there. And when my brother died, I realized that I had a small amount of reservation. And I was 99% there. I was 95% there. I was close, but I wasn't all the way there in terms of surrendering that I have this disease, that there's no cure, but that there's a way to arrest it. And it's wonderful if I just do it. And after my brother died, I threw in the rest of the towel. I became 100% innocent. And it's really been an amazing ride ever since. I never know what I'm going to say when I do these things. And I say a prayer, I've said this set aside prayer just before Phil introduced me. I already put in my 7th tradition money. I never know what I'm going to say. But, I want to talk to you about some spiritual things. One that Phil asked me to touch on, and it's just the beauty of things. So I had heard about these people at these concerts that are in recovery and how they help each other stay sober. And it's wonderful, but I'd never been in the right environment. So I found myself on the beach in Mexico at this Dead End Company music festival called Playing in the Sand, which is a word play on their song Playing in the Band, right? And at 10 in the morning, they had meetings on the beach. And the groups are called war frets, and war frets are people in recovery that are deadheads that get together to help one another. And there's more people in AA than in other fellowships, but there's AA, NAC, they all fit in this wharf rat group because we all suffer from some form of addiction, and then the music is the commonality. And so I get there the first time I'm there, and I go to the 10 o'clock meeting, and this woman says to me, "Didn't you speak at a retreat in Nassau County?" Like, yeah, I did. I met you then, I didn't know who she was. But I'm sitting there in a meeting. They used to have it at all these different hotels. So there were 6 people. And one of them was a woman that heard me speak a couple of years before at a spiritual retreat. How does that happen? And we've become very fast friends since then. And then each of the years since then, they all have been at these resorts that are all the same property. So it's all of us hanging out by the pool all day and meetings. And I don't know if I can if I can show you, if I can share as a host a picture of us praying. It's actually, we're singing a few lines from this song called Black Peter when the meeting is over. And what I can tell you is there are a lot of people that are in this picture, including me, who have tears in their eyes or just running down their faces because it's such a beautiful thing that we're experiencing. And it's become a very big spiritual part of my program. That's not very big, right? Bill, can you get this to show up or no? Maybe
Should
not.
be able to screen share it.
I might not. I'm not that. This is not the computer I'm used to. But let me go back to Zoom. And this is just such a tremendous thing that I've experienced. And this has become a big part of my recovery. And I met all these people, and they're all from different backgrounds, live in different places, and they're not all AA. Some of them are NA, some of them are CA, some here's a, can you guys see that or no? How about that? Can you see that? That's us wrapping up a meeting on the beach at 10 in the morning. So when I tell you I get goosebumps thinking about this, you can imagine, right? I'm in there somewhere. And we are singing the words of this song that have to about the friends coming around when the guy's dying, and it's just a beautiful song, and it's a beautiful thing that my heart's in. And we've been meeting on Zoom twice a week for more than 2.5 years. So you do the math, well over 250 meetings. And those people that I met on the beach, I see them when I go to shows. I don't see all of them at every show, but I see a lot of them at a lot of different shows I go to. So a few months into the pandemic, my paths crossed with a woman who's in NA. And this woman who's in NA was coming up on 20 years or 20 years at the time. I told you about my friend Danny, who died in California after I was supposed to be watching Danny. This woman in NA is a wharf rat because the music's the commonality, and it's Danny's little sister. And I spent a lot of time at their house and spent a lot of time. She was sort of like my kid sister for a while when we were hanging out and partying every single day, and her parents were never home, and I didn't really have a home. And she's in my life today, and it's like she's back. And she had a resentment all that time, from 1983 to 2000, until 37 years. Because I was where did I go? Why wasn't I there when Danny died? Why didn't I come to the funeral? Why didn't I help her? Why didn't I hold her? And all those years she resented it. And then when she heard me share on a Zoom meeting, and she went, "Oh my, now I get it. You were just doing what any alcoholic, drug addict does. You found a gravy train, you found your needs were being, and all you were chasing your addiction, you're chasing your drinking. And anybody that got hurt or discarded in the process was just part of the deal. Because isn't that what we do? And you know, and the first time I saw her was a little while after that at a show or at a picnic before a show, and we go to see music together. We spend time together. I stayed at her house. It's just the coolest thing to have her back in my life, and it's through this Wharf Rat group. And we've invited people that we didn't meet on the beach. Our Wharf Rat group's called Wharf Rats Playing in the Sand, and we, like I said, we have a meeting twice a week, and it's wonderful. And it's just, my heart is so in that, and I love these guys, and I see them in real life at different things, and I see, you know, at a show or at different events, different conventions, whatever. And it's like the time never passed since the last time I saw them. And these are people that will drop everything to help somebody. These are the people that are like my sponsor that would give you the shirt off their back. These are the people that would say, I'm having a hard time. What am I doing wrong? What am I, you know, how do I fix this? You know, and you know, my parents think I spend too much time and too much money going to concerts. I don't think if there were more to go to that I could fit into my year, and whatever it is, it's worth, I can't put a price on it. Because for me, when I see, it's like going to a weekend convention or retreat, an AA retreat with this really super cool music that a lot of it is very deep and it touches us. And it's, you know, we have this thing in AA that we call the fourth dimension of existence. And the fourth dimension of existence is a spiritual place. And I was doing a programming for a convention a few years ago, and I asked three of the speakers, put them on a panel. I said, how do you get to the fourth dimension of existence? Can you stay there? How do you get back, you know? And my friend Teresa F. Van Nuys, California, said, fourth dimension of existence is right here, right now, not a minute ago, and not a minute from now. It's actually in the present. And that's one definition for sure. But for me, the fourth dimension of existence is like a map of a map with light, with things going everywhere. And one of the roads that I'm on in this spiritual journey is this Wharf Rat road. And I've got so many wonderful friends, you know, and would do anything, you know, get on a plane, would do anything to help each other, help another person. And we work together at helping people. And it's just it's part of the path down in what the fourth dimension of my existence looks like. And it's a map that I can't see ahead, and I can only see the map right here. I don't know where it's going, but wherever it's going to go is going to be better than I could plan it. However I write the script for what life should be or my sobriety should be, isn't going to be as good as what I get. And the less that I am responsible for, the easier my life is. When I realize that I'm responsible for a very small amount of things, and the power is really responsible for most of it, even working through other people, it's less things I need to worry about, right? The more that the higher power does, the less I have to worry about, the more my life is really like being retired or being on a vacation. You know, so I'm speaking at a rehab, I don't know, 15 years ago, and I have no idea what I'm doing after the meeting, but I'm sort of like in a daze. Well, I was talking about spiritual experiences and awakenings, which is a weird topic to give people in rehab, but I prayed and that's what came out. And then I got Serenity, Courage, Wisdom, like lettering done. Next thing you know, I'm like sort of in a daze, like I'm just there, and I've tattooed on my arm, and I'm driving, I have this convertible, and I'm driving down this road called Richmond, which ends in a circle, and I'm headed south. When I sort of come to or come down, or I get back into the third dimension, like that, I'm no longer like on the cloud. And I'm like, what should I do now? And it occurs to me that the giving group starts at 8 o'clock and it's around the corner. So that's obvious. I was pointed at it. That's where I was meant to go. So a number of years later, I had to take my daughter to a rehab, and And it was a terrible, her use was terrible. And it was a boyfriend, and there's always a boyfriend involved, and it's not the boyfriend's fault because it's just a different name and a different face, and she picks him, right? Thank God she's doing well now. I want to say that. But so my son and me and my daughter went to drop her off on top of a mountain in Tennessee, in Sevierville. And we stayed at my friend Billy's house because we had to leave early. We get back a week later, it's a Friday night, I'm exhausted. It's been a very emotional 10 days. And so the same rehab they used to have, you didn't have to have a pass. You just showed up and there were meetings where people from the outside could come in. And so I walked into this meeting and this guy is talking to me before, and I look at him. You ever have where you're like, I've talked to this guy 50 times, I know who he is, but in a million years, I can't give you the name and I can't place him. It's sort of like amnesia. And it's one of those times where this power that exists in the ether gave me amnesia. I couldn't have given you his name if my life depended on it. And after the meeting, he's telling me he's hanging out with these guys from this Oxford house, and he's turning his life around, and I get in the truck and I'm driving away, and I'm about a mile down the street. And it's like a light bulb going off. This is the guy that was trying to shoot heroin into my daughter's carotid artery 2 weeks ago. Now, but he was completely safe because I'm a couple miles away pointing in the other direction. I don't know where he went. And I think the power made my brain just have a blank. And so then as I'm driving home from there, I'm like, what am I going to do? What do I do if this guy shows up at my home group tomorrow night? Because the way he says he's living his life now, he probably will. And I thought, well, it's my job to reach out my hand and shake his hand and say, welcome, I'm glad you're here. Now, I don't have to mean it, but he's got to get the feeling. I got to say it so convincingly that he knows, he thinks I mean it. Because it's only my job to make him feel welcome, whether I inside feel welcoming or not. My actions need to make him feel welcome, right? That's all that matters in the home. And he shows up at the home group. And he's just like anybody else, just another bozo on the bus is just trying to get well. And so I prayed on it, and so I knew that I had to make him feel welcome if he showed up the next day, which he did, by the way. But I wasn't faking it. Like, I really meant it when I said, welcome, I'm glad you're here. Because all that other stuff is an outside issue. He's walking into a meeting. It's my job to welcome people and make them feel warm, show them where the coffee is if it's their first time, see if they need help with anything. That's my job, not to judge people, right? And that is, and that whole lesson, it just changed me, right? I mean, how could I even get there? It just blows my mind. And it all happened when I was just doing something else. I didn't think about it, it just happened. So, newer people, you might not have had the spiritual experiences that some of us more people have been around a while that have had. But let me tell you about a spiritual experience that nobody really thinks about. So I have ADD, so my filing system's a little bit weak. But let's say I didn't. It doesn't. Let's say I got a garbage can here, and every time you hear something at a meeting that resonates with you, it's on a piece of paper, and my filing system, I throw it in the can. Flat pieces of paper. They're in there. They're all mixed up. They're not filed. I've got all these information, these insights, these things I can say that will help somebody or help me get through something. And it's just sort of, they're all over the map, right? I got hundreds of, if you're going to AA meetings a lot, you got hundreds and hundreds of people saying things that resonate. And so you put that in this filing basket. And somebody comes up to you with a quandary that you've been through. And aren't you shocked when you're able to pull 3 or 4 or 5 of the exact right morsels in the exact right order to feed it to that other guy out of that messed up filing system? How do they just pop up right in the right order to help somebody the most? That is a spiritual experience, and it happens to all of us. We just find we're able to help somebody when we couldn't think our way through helping them, and these tools just pop into our heads, right? And when I think about life that way, there's so much that there's. It's 8:59. I have to go with, but what my sponsor says that nobody gets sober after 9 o'clock. I do want to say that if you're going to ask me how we should close the meeting, it's not a prayer, but I'm particularly fond of our Declaration of Unity, and especially having family members in recovery. That really touches my heart. But thank you for having me. I love this meeting, and I respect what you do when I listen to Daily Ponderables read to me every day in the shower. And Phil, thank you for asking me, and I hope that I said something that helps somebody today.